So let's take a look at what we really want our students to understand when we talk about place value. We want them to connect these basic four concepts here. We want them to understand, first of all, look at the center of the diagram. Children learn to count first. They learn to count by ones, then we want them to count by groups, like by twos or fives and singles, and then we want them to learn to count by tens and ones. So usually we use something like base 10 blocks so that they learn to count by tens and ones, and you can see the picture of those at the top of the diagram. So we want them to represent certain quantities in multiple ways so that they get the concept of exchanging 110 for 10 ones or 100 for 10 tens. We also want them to know the oral names of the numbers written in standard form and then in base 10 form, and then the written names of the numbers. So connecting all these things together is important when teaching place value. We also want the students to understand how large a number really is. And that in itself can be a very difficult concept for students to imagine. For instance, most young students have really no concept of time, no concept of how large a number is. For instance, if you ask them how old you might be, they might say that you're in your 40s because they have no idea how much value 40-something represents. One of the things that we use to teach place value is a place value chart. And here's one that you've probably seen before, but in teaching place value, it's very important that we group the sections in what we call periods, and they're grouped in threes. This one actually has it color-coded. Because after each group of three, or each period, is where the comma goes and that you say the name of that period. So if there were digits in the billions place, you might say 112 billion, 604 million, 563,248. The ones period is the only period that does not have the name said after it. So teaching children how to put digits in these boxes and then how to learn to read the numbers is very important. When teaching place value, we use models. Proportional models are important for the very early learning years because we want students to be able to see the actual size of things and how it compares. Like when you stack 10 ones cubes, it's the same exact size as a tens rod. And when you lay 10 tens rods together, it becomes a hundreds flat. And when you stack 10 hundreds flats together, it becomes a thousands cube. Now, as the students begin to understand this, teachers can also use other things for working with place value concepts that are not proportional, and they're much cheaper. You can go to the store, for instance, and buy maybe graham crackers for hundreds flats, maybe some linguine noodles or spaghetti noodles for the tens rods, and maybe some Cheerios for the ones. But those will not be proportional, so we have to be careful to give students practice with proportional models as well. There are some common misconceptions with place value. A couple of them we've talked about, but the first has to do with value, that children often confuse digits because they just don't understand the concept of the value of numbers. We did discuss that. The other thing that kind of comes along with the value is the common misconception of reversals. And that's when children reverse their numbers because they don't understand that the digit in the tens place is worth 10 of that particular number. So they'll frequently flip those numbers, not thinking that they're changing the value. Also, multi-digit numbers and decimals. Students have a great amount of confusion with place value when it comes to decimals. We're not going to get into this right now. We'll get into it in later chapters, but you need to know to set the foundation for your whole number place values very strong so that when it comes to decimal place values, the students will have a great foundation for that. So here are some questions to help children with values and size of numbers. And of course, these are just sample questions. You can use any questions, but like, what if the room were covered with pennies? So maybe we could do some measuring and see what the square, or actually the cubic feet of a particular room is, how much space a certain stack of pennies takes, and then use some math, and it would be a ginormous number. So on your weekly page, I have added 4 videos that I think will help you a lot. So let's look at these just quickly. The one on the top left is actually from LearnZillion, and it will explain place value just to give you a little stronger foundation. The video at the top right, Making Math Fun with Place Value Games, is a glimpse into a classroom where you can see children actually playing some games with place value and how the teachers use that to reinforce the concept. Down in the bottom left, a British school. These 2 men that you actually are seeing are actually sitting in a different room with a TV monitor and some headphones, and they're watching teachers teach live some place value concepts to a very young class, and then they're talking about it to each other and kind of analyzing what's going on in the classroom. It's a very interesting lesson. Finally, the last video, the one on the bottom right, is actually a video of a gentleman reading the book How Big is a Million? If you can use literature to tie in with your math concepts, you will ignite some children who are very verbal linguistic, and they may not think in a mathematics way, but when you've tied it to literacy, you've brought a different type of learning into the classroom. Finally, in the documents section on your weekly page, I have added an activity package that you will probably find useful with place value. So be sure to download that on your computer, and you can use it in field studies internship and when you get your own classroom.